Hi, all. I am Pansy Johnson. I'm the owner and founder of PJMP Professional Development. PJMP Professional Development is all about encouraging, educating, and elevating young professionals. So I'm so excited to be here with you all today. And today we're going to be talking about effective strategies for project planning and public speaking. So, just a quick overview. If you're anything like me, I really like to know exactly what we're going to be talking about, what you can expect. So, I'm just going to go through a quick overview. First, we're going to be talking about what is project planning. And then we're going to talk about the importance of project planning, building a project timeline, smart goal setting, and identifying partners, resources, and responsibilities. And also, we're going to end with talking about the three P's of public speaking: prepare, practice, and present. So, a little bit about me, I do like to share little facts, and I thought this one was interesting and right on target for what we're going to be talking about today. Organizations with mature project management and or project planning practices see 92% of their projects succeed, deliver three times more value, and consistently exceed their stakeholders' expectations. And this is according to the Project Management Academy. So I wonder, did you know how important project planning is to any project that you are expecting to participate in or any project that you are managing? It's so important that you do have that planning component. As it says right here, you see 92% of projects succeed because of the project planning. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And this just really validates and shows how important project planning is. Next, let's talk about briefly what is project planning, right? And in simple terms, project planning is the process of outlining all the necessary steps to complete a project before it begins, right? So when you are tasked with a project, right, you want to immediately start the planning process, right, to be able to actually reach that goal, which we're going to talk a little bit more later about how to go through that planning process and what are the steps you're supposed to take. But literally, just in simple terms, project planning is just outlining all of those necessary steps you need to reach that goal within the project. So next, let's talk about the importance of project planning. And as we kind of start thinking through this, I want you to think about three areas we're going to talk about today. So project success can be identified and captured through efficiency, risk management, and clear communication. So first, let's start with efficiency. Efficiency helps provide the scope of the project, set realistic timelines, and control costs, ensuring the project stays on track and within budget. When you think about efficiency, I want you to think about, right, staying on task, right? It says setting those realistic timelines, which we're going to talk about later, but you want everything to be efficient. And in the efficient process, it's important for you to go ahead and start to write out those tasks that you need to do, right? This can be, you can write out the tasks within a Google Doc, an Excel form, Word doc, just writing out those tasks so that you can start to set those realistic expectations. You can kind of start to plan out what your project is going to look like so that you can be efficient and you are, you know, completing everything in a timely manner. The next thing is risk management. So it says risk management project planning allows teams to proactively identify potential risks, challenges, and uncertainties before they occur. So with risk management, I want you to think about anything that could possibly happen within the project planning phase or within the project phase that could cause risk, right? So a lot of times when you are working on a project, for example, I'm going to use the example today, like if we were to close a branch or a specific bank, it would be certain things that we would need to do to ensure that that bank was closed on a specific date, right? By the specific date that we are selecting that we're going to close this branch. And so with that, some of the risk would be, right, the cost, right? So you want to make sure that utilities are cut off. You want to make sure that vendors are contacted because you don't want to be getting charged and you're no longer in this building, right? That can cause risk factors if you have a legal document in place and things are not completed in a timely manner. It can also cross over into legal. And so you just want to make sure that you understand those things, that you identify those things, and you stay on a timely a timeline that's going to keep you not only efficient in the project planning phase, but also tackling and ensuring that you are mitigating the risk within the project planning phase. And then the last thing we want to talk about is clear communication. Clear communication and planning ensures all stakeholders are aligned by providing a clear vision, objectives, and a detailed project scope. So this is so, if there was any one of them, all of these are important, but communication is so important. Communication is going to help you be efficient. Communication is going to help you be able to navigate if there are any risk management factors that you need to identify. Clear communication is you want to make sure that every person on each level understands what is going on within the project planning phase and what's going on within the project. That's going to ensure that there is clear vision, that everyone understands what they're supposed to be doing, everyone understands their task, everyone understands what's been completed, what hasn't been completed, and you're all moving in the same direction and making sure everything is completed by that set deadline. And so that is why clear communication is so important. So again, as you think about the importance of the project planning phase, think about these three areas and what you can do in each area to make sure that you are hitting your targeted goal as you work through the project planning phase. Next thing, let's talk about 4 steps to building a project timeline. All right. So just at a high level, just a timeline, right? If you just think about a timeline is just you have your start date, right? You have the things that the specific dates that things need to be completed. But even with building that project timeline, there are specific components that you want to be thinking about, not just the dates, but you want to be thinking about the things that you need to do within this project timeline. So let's start at the top. The first thing you want to do is define the project deliverables. Clearly define the project's goals and boundaries to ensure everyone is focused on the same objectives. So if you know, for example, we are working on this project to close this specific location, right? That is our goal. We need to close this location by the end of the year, right? And it's October now, so we're aiming to get there, right? For example. So we've already identified that that's the goal. That is what we're clearly defining. Everyone knows, hey, we're trying to close this specific branch location by the end of the year. That's our specific goal. The next thing is break down the task. Break down each work package into a list of the individual activities required to complete it. So if we know, hey, we're closing this building, we know that we have to contact vendors. We know we have to get services cut off. We know that all of these items that we might have that we were utilizing in this branch, whether it was checks and specific safe deposits, all those things have to be moved out of this location by the end of the year. And so we want to break down those tasks. Who are handling those tasks on the team, right? We have a team who is all handling those different tasks and also giving each other a specific timeline to have those tasks completed, which brings me to the next area: estimate timeline and resources. Identify who is responsible for each task and what other resources that are needed during that time. So specifically, if I'm supposed to be calling all of the vendors and I need to have that completed by the end of November, well, I got to get on it, right? And so that I know within this specific task, hey, my task is to call each of these vendors and also update the list to ensure that everyone is updated on where we are within the project and what has been completed and what has not. The next thing is set milestones and build a timeline. Establish key milestones, which are significant points in the project to mark progress and important achievements. So, for example, you have a timeline. So now that you have identified everything, the tasks that each person is going to be working on, you know your goal, you know you all are moving towards completing that goal. It's now time to do a high level timeline, right? A high level timeline from start to finish. You can, you're starting in October, you're going to do a follow up in November. And by November 31st or December, let's just say December 15th, you plan to have all those things completed. And then you're going to present um, by January 1 because you're going to present to the stakeholders by January 1 to ensure that they are aware of everything that's been completed. And so that's kind of the steps you want to take when you're building out your project timeline. And just keep it simple. Keep everything simple, but this is going to help ensure that you are touching each important component as you build out that project timeline. Next thing, let's go through SMART goal setting in the project planning phase. So the first thing is be specific. So when you are planning out this project, you want to be specific. Be specific about your goal. The goal should be clear and detailed. So for example, if we are creating a new app, right? Instead of just saying, okay, we want to improve the user experience within this app, we're going to say a specific goal would be improve the user experience by reducing average load time by 20%. So we want to put numbers on there. We want to really set goals that we want to see, right? For example, we want to have everything complete. We want to have at least 50% of this project complete. If we're closing a branch, we want to have at least 50%. Our goal is to have 50% of the project completed by the beginning of November, right? Because we know everything has to be completed by the end of December. And so you're setting those specific goals. The next thing is measurable. The goal must have quantifiable metrics to track progress and determine success. This can include percentages, numbers, or other data points. So you want to also track these metrics, right? Track what's been completed, right? For example, I said if I was contacting, I had 100 vendors to contact, for example. Let's say that you're tracking that as it's completed. You could say, okay, I have 20% completed. And you're able, as you continue to complete things, you're able to measure and have those metrics in place so that you can actually see the numbers and the percentages that you still have to go, but also what you've completed. Next thing is achievable. The goal should be realistic and attainable given the available resources, constraints, and team capabilities. The last thing you want to do within a project is set unrealistic expectations, right? Or unrealistic goals. You want to make sure that everything is attainable, that you have the appropriate individuals on your team, that you have enough people on your team, that you have enough people working on things. You don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed or taking on too much. You want it all to be realistic, right? If it's October and we know we have the end of the year, depending with closing a specific location. Okay, if we have a huge team, we know that we can get that accomplished. Maybe if we only have a couple of people, that might not be attainable. So we want to be realistic and make sure that that is attainable. And also thinking about constraints, right? Hourly, right? If we need to turn off all of the security system, but the security team can't come in until after hours, well, someone hourly, are they going to be able to work overtime? So these are real questions that you have to think about throughout the project, or we're going to have someone's salary kind of be able to step in and come in after hours to make sure that's completed. So you just want to make sure that you are discussing those different areas. Next thing is relevant. The goals should align with the overall project objectives and larger organizational goals, making it worthwhile and impactful, right? Everything should be aligning together. This is our overall goal to close this location because we're moving towards moving towards saving. That's the goal this year. Let's just say that's the we're just going to use that for an example. It wouldn't be smart for us as an organization to start to close this location and look at trying to open a whole nother location. What we said this year, our one of our values is saving. So it's just like making sure that all those things are moving in the right direction and we're keeping the overall goals of the organization also in mind. The last thing is time bound. The goals must have a clear deadline or defined end date to create a sense of urgency and help with prioritization. This is so important. It's important. You don't want to just be working on a project where you don't even know what the timeline is. You don't know what the date is. You just kind of working on it as you go, which you'll have projects like that that are smaller. But when you have a huge project, a very important project, you always want to set a deadline. Even at work for myself, like when I am asked to do something and I'm not given like a specific deadline, I always set a personal deadline for myself just to keep me on track because you want to make sure that you are working towards that and everything is completed in a timely manner. And so when you have a project, it's very important to always keep that deadline in place so that you're staying on that specific timeline that you have created. Next thing, let's talk about the importance of project planning in these three areas as well. Identifying partners, resources, and responsibilities. So, with project partners are also known as stakeholders. They include anyone with a vested interest in the project's outcome. They can be internal, external, or a mix of both. So, some of our project partners, for example, is going to be it could be your teammates, it could be the executive leaders, it could be the management, it could be the project management or directors of the project. All of these individuals are important and they play key roles within the project planning phase, right? So you know that at the end of your project planning phase, you're going to have to present this presentation to the key stakeholders. So it's going to be important. You're going to communicate totally different to key stakeholders than you would anyone that's on like your teammates, right? And individuals that you're working with side by side on the team with your teammates, you might give them all of these different details and everything that is going on that you're handling. What with key stakeholders, they really just want to know when was it completed, what still needs to be done, and they just need to know at a high level. So it's going to be two totally different communication styles, and that's why it's important to know who the project partners are and the different roles that they play. Next thing is clear resources, right? Resources encompass all the tangible and intangible required to complete the project successfully. For example, so we're back to our main example of we're closing this branch location, we're closing this bank or this building. It's going to be important, right? If there is trash, for example, and let's say we need a dumpster, right? We're not going to just bring a small dumpster that we would have like maybe at one of our homes, right? That's too small. We're going to need maybe like a city dumpster, a much larger dumpster to be able to have make everything much more efficient and be able to easily throw away the things that we need without having to constantly throw away the trash and empty out the trash. So that's just like a resource that we know we will need. Other resources we might need is just we might need different team members, right? To be able, which we talked about earlier, to be able to complete all of these different items that we have. So just ensuring that you are utilizing the resources that you have, the contacts that you have, and being able to easily identify them so that you can get through the project successfully. The last thing is clear roles and responsibilities. And we kind of touched on this a minute ago with clear communication, but I just want to reiterate here it says clear roles and responsibilities are vital for avoiding confusion, preventing work overlap, and ensuring accountability. This is so vital. You all, when you are on a project, it's so important. We talked about kind of setting tasks for everyone. It's so vital to ensure that you know each person who is, you have set them a role, a responsibility, and each person knows exactly what they need to be doing. A lot of times in this area, when this is not done appropriately or properly, you run into confusion, you run into issues, you run into individuals feeling overworked or being overworked within the project because they're trying to take on more than what they can even take on, more than what they really have the capacity to take on. And so that's why it's important that everyone has equal share of responsibilities within the project planning phase. Now that we're kind of through the project planning phase, we understand the importance. We know what we need to do to be able to have the build out the timeline. Now we're ready to kind of think about public speaking, right? Presenting this to the stakeholders, presenting this to management, presenting this to our leaders. And the first thing I want you to think about with public speaking is preparation, right? You need to prepare. Clearly prepare your content by organizing key points and knowing your audience, right? So during the prepare phase, you want to build out your presentation. You want to have notes and key points that you want to discuss and talk about with the stakeholders. They are important, right? They don't need all the details. You can touch on those details, but you want to keep everything high level and organized. And so you want to prepare during this stage. You want to build out. You want to make sure everything looks professional. And this is the stage that you're going to do that. The next thing is now that you have the presentation completed, and even in the presentation, if you're working with a team, you want to make sure that's broken out, right? Everybody is doing their part within the presentation, but making sure that everything is cohesive, everything sounds cohesive. You're all working together on this. But if you're doing it individually, you just make sure that it does sound professional and you're keeping everything high level and you have your key points. Next thing we're going to move into, once the presentation is completed and you've prepared, you want to practice that, right? Practice your delivery through methods like rehearsing with a mirror or recording yourself and practicing in chunks. I would say this part is so important. This is the part that I want you all to really remember is practice makes perfect. I know we've heard that practice makes perfect. It really does. Now you don't want to over practice, but you definitely want to practice. You want to get comfortable speaking. You want to get comfortable talking about what you're going to be talking about within the project. And so it's important that you're practicing on that. And that during the practice phase, that's your time also to take notes and have notes within your presentation. A lot of presentations now within different platforms, which you have PowerPoint, you have Canva, you have different platforms that you can use to prepare your presentation. Even Google Docs has, I think, a presentation um, option as well, but it allows you to put in notes, right? So if you are videoing that, you can still be able to look at your notes and kind of have your talking points. But also, if you don't have that, and you're like, hey, Pansy, I get nervous, girl. I get really nervous. I would also advise you to maybe have some index cards where you just kind of have your key notes, your top levels. So if you do feel like you ramble or you get off subject pretty easily, that's going to help you keep you on subject. So it's perfectly fine to have those things as well. And I recommend index cards because they're much more smaller than having like an actual paper. So if that's something that you feel like you get really nervous and it's just too much, then having those index cards really make a difference. And I would advise those as well. And then last thing, now you've prepared, you've practiced, you're ready to present, right? Present by focusing confident body language, eye contact, and engaging your audience. In the presenting and being a very good public speaker, it's all about the three P's, right? Preparation, practice, and when you prepare and you practice, you're going to automatically feel more confident in what you're talking about because you know what you're talking about, right? When you know what you're talking about, you're more confident in that area. So I would definitely advise these are the three areas that I would say is going to help you as you prepare to talk about that project to the key stakeholders. And another thing, I didn't add this on here, but also I would say like prepare for questions, right? If you are live or you're doing it in person, they're probably going to have questions. So think about some of those components within the project that they may ask about, or if there's any risk management factors that you need to talk about that they might want a little bit more detail in. You want to make sure that you have those just like key areas that you are able to elaborate a little bit more on. So today we've talked about a lot, and so I'm just going to do like a couple just key takeaways. We talked about project planning. We've talked about the importance of project planning, right? Having that efficiency. We talked about clear communication, why it's so important. We talked about risk management. We talked about setting those SMART goals, right? Being specific, measurable, making sure that you have stuff that's, setting goals that are attainable, relevant, time bound. We talked about identifying partners, resources, and responsibilities, understanding your partners, right? The different stakeholders, your teammates, employees with the company, HR, or different individuals that you're going to be working with on the managers, or even your project director or leaders. You need to understand and know these individuals that are going to play key roles within the project. Knowing your resources, right? What resources do you have? Who are individuals that can help? Who are vendors you can contact that's going to make this process much easier? Understanding those resources and knowing the responsibilities within the team, right? It takes a team. It takes a team to complete a project. And so it's so important that everyone understands their roles, they understand their responsibility within the project. So there is no miscommunication and there is no confusion within the project planning phase. And now that once you're done with the project planning phase, you got your timeline, you got your task in order, whether you're doing that in a Word doc or a Google Doc or even like in a Excel file. Now you're ready for to prepare. You got all the timeline, you got everything completed. Now you're ready to for the public speaking portion to be able to present that project. And so I'll just always think about the three P's: prepare, practice, and you're ready to present. And so the biggest thing within the project planning phase is it takes everyone, it takes a team. You want to make sure that everything is efficient and that you all are working together to accomplish the goal in that specific deadline. And then, yeah, presenting that and also being ready for any questions that you may be asked. So we've covered a lot, but I am sure that if you really do um, utilize these different components and the advice that has been given and just the insight and resources that we've discussed today, that you will be great at the project planning phase, and also even presenting the project to key stakeholders within the organization. So, really quick, this is my contact information. As I mentioned, I'm the owner of PJMP Professional Development. I offer resume building, public speaking services, professional development trainings, and I also offer networking opportunities for young professionals here in Central Arkansas. And so, if you have any questions after today's presentation, please feel free to reach out to me at pjmpprofessionaldevelopment@gmail.com. You also can follow PJMP Professional Development on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you just type in PJMP Professional Development, we should pop up. And so, yeah, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you all for attending, and I know you're going to be great in the project planning and public speaking area after today.